From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Stefania Bravo, and this is From the South. We start in Colombia, where students who were protesting for a higher education budget have been met with heavy police repression. Riot police reportedly attacked protesters with tear gas canisters, batons, and even their fists. The students have been demonstrating throughout the day. They were later joined by indigenous groups and workers' unions who are against President Duque's tax reform, which seeks to tax basic goods. Indigenous groups from Colombia's Chocó department are also protesting against high levels of violence in their war-torn region. Over 400 members of the region's indigenous communities gathered in front of the Ombudsman office in Bogotá. The protesters are demanding for an audience with President Iván Duque to address the violence affecting their community.
The city of Bogotá has received a delegation of Embera sisters and brothers for the past 3 days, totaling 450 people. They seek a direct dialogue with the president and want to explain the issues which led them to march to the city of Bogotá.
A young Mapuche was killed by Chile's national police during a raid in his community on Wednesday. Camilo Catrallinca was shot in the head twice by special forces deployed to the area of Temucuiqui. Social organizations and several lawmakers are holding the state responsible for the murder and are demanding an investigation. Meanwhile, hundreds of people protested in Santiago to condemn the ongoing violence against the Mapuche people and what they call their segregation from society. Members of these special forces also shot 3 minors, including a 15-year-old teenager who is in critical condition. This information was confirmed by Temucuiqui authorities, who added that the minor is being held in the Coyupuyi police station. According to a community spokesperson, the young man witnessed the murder of Camilo Catrillanca. Chile's social organizations continue to rally in Santiago to demand answers to the government's violent crackdown, resulting in the fatalities of the indigenous people. They are outraged over the militarization of the Gualmapu region, which has led to the deaths of 16 Mapuches in recent years. Social leaders are calling on citizens to take action against government repression, as well as the continued appropriation of their lands.
Since 1990, we have had many Mapuche deaths across all governments. There is a systematic logic by all sectors of the right wing that sides with landowners and dictates that if a Mapuche does not bend to the will of the state, they will be killed.
We need all unions to call on a mass demonstration across the entire country. We need to fight against the repression the Mapuche face. They must be allowed to be self-governed. Their lands must be demilitarized and the Jungle Command must be disbanded.
Moving on to Mexico, another group of migrants is rushing to reach the U.S. border to join the first group already in Tijuana. On Tuesday and Wednesday, 2 groups of around 700 migrants each arrived in Tijuana on the border with the U.S. The caravan left Honduras 1 month ago. And as more and more migrants continue to arrive in Tijuana, workers on the U.S. side of the border are reinforcing the existing wall. This is part of President Donald Trump's numerous measures to put a stop to the migrant caravan seeking asylum in the U.S. And among those migrants who arrived at the El Chaparral port of entry in Tijuana are 78 members of the LGBT community. They have added their names to a list that will be used by U.S. immigration officials to hear individual requests for political asylum. The small group broke off from the main caravan days ago and have reportedly faced discrimination throughout the journey.
We come in peace. We want to do things correctly. We don't want to jump over walls. We don't want to violate US law. We are a group of around 78 people from the sexually diverse community. Our objective today is to request our number so that maybe within 2 or 3 weeks, we don't know how long it will take to get a number, we can request political asylum. Beforehand, to ask the government of the United States to please help us, to open their doors, because we are not people who cause trouble. We come fleeing from trouble. We come fleeing from discrimination. We come fleeing from a lot of violence in Honduras and Central America.
The lawyers and family of murdered indigenous leader Berta Cáceres have condemned the many irregularities during her ongoing murder trial in Honduras. The case has become a struggle against the state and highlights the difficulties in trying to get justice.
The hearings of defendants have been continuously carried out privately, in the absence of Berta Cáceres' family and the legal team. There have also been occasions where hearings have taken place without anyone being notified.
We continue condemning these actions that the public ministry and the court are doing because due process has not been respected. We have always said that we want a trial with guarantees, and it's unbelievable that a trial without legality or legitimacy from the victims is being carried out.
Since the trial began, lawyers and family have spoken out against the irregularities. On top of that, the court is not accepting evidence against the defendants, raising further questions about law and order.
This shows a clear union between the institutions and organized crime. We are speaking of hitmen and of the armed forces. It can be a union with the institutional structure of the government and the state of Honduras.
Berta Cáceres defended the Hualcarque River in the northwest of Honduras from a government decree permitting the construction of a hydroelectric plant. The decision was illegitimate because no referendum was carried with the indigenous people. Rather, it was a deal done behind closed doors between the state and the Desarrollos Energéticos company.
We know the truth, we know who participated and who did not. We know that this murder came from the company DESA and what level of involvement their executive members had.
According to the lawyers of Berta Cáceres, the public ministry and the court have failed to uphold the law and have failed in their responsibility, despite existing evidence showing the defendants were part of the government and later employed by the DESA company.
This man called David Castillo, before being part of this company, was part of the officials of the National Electric Company, specifically linked to this topic.
The verdict is expected soon on the 8 that stand accused of the murder. The family's expectations are low, so they are already planning to raise the case to an international stage.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. 450 campesino families in Brazil face eviction at any moment from the city of Campo do Meio in the state of Minas Gerais. These families say their forced eviction will benefit a coffee grower landowner.
This sugarcane producing plant ceased operating after it became bankrupt in 1996. For 20 years now, it's been occupied by dozens of campesino families, but the owners started a legal process in 2016 so they could lease the land to the agricultural corporation Jodil, owned by well-known coffee producer João Faria, who works directly with companies like Nestlé and Jacobs Douwe Egberts.
He finances this conflict and also finances the lack of resolution for the conflict through other means. He is trying to help the owners of this abandoned factory to recover the land.
A week ago, authorities decreed the eviction of 450 families living there. Sebastião and Lucien are among those who chose to resist and stay put. They grow a number of crops on that land, and in the past it was unusable. Landowner Faria would greatly benefit from their eviction since it would allow him to expand his coffee empire.
Porque ele vai botar monte de trator na terra para colher o café.
He is going to bring many tractors to harvest the coffee, and only a few people will be allowed to work here. The rest will be left unemployed. João Faria is going to create jobs. Everything he buys, everything he invests in comes from outside. So what kind of employment is he going to bring exactly?
Tudo ele vai comprar fora.
The campesino families have invested nearly $6 million in infrastructure and crops. They are responsible for producing over 500 tons of coffee a year. For the landless workers movement, this case won't advance the government's agrarian reform. The eviction of these people from regenerated lands goes hand in hand with the country's policies.
We all understand that all of these measures began with the 2016 coup against former President Dilma Rousseff. They are part of a society that's pushing for conservative ideals that have now consolidated with her new president, Jair Bolsonaro.
Facing the onset of the agribusiness, the ineffective state, and the contradictory decisions of the legal system, these campesinos promised to stand firm and continue producing healthy products, and above all, maintain their dignity.
The Senate in Argentina has approved the 2019 budget despite heavy protests. With 45 votes in favor, 24 against, and 1 abstention, senators passed the budget proposed by President Mauricio Macri after 13 hours of debate. This budget is aimed at maintaining the financial agreements the government signed with the International Monetary Fund. Nonetheless, Argentines continue to struggle with price hikes and the overall economic crisis. Many believe that these austerity measures are hurting those most vulnerable.
Now, the price of vegetables has increased, fuel prices have increased, the price of transport has increased. Every day the price of something increases and people can't really bear it anymore.
I am not making any money. I am not selling anything. And people notice when you modify the prices a little. They feel like they're being ripped off. And they are very careful when it comes to buying.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more.
After 13 hours of debate, the 2019 annual budget was approved in Congress. The budget includes many demands of the International Monetary Fund, as well as the payment of foreign debt. It also includes budget cuts in health, education, culture, and also massive layoffs in the public sector. Trade unions are greatly concerned about this budget and have confirmed they will continue to protest.
We thank Edgardo for that report. Ecuador's National Assembly recently dismissed a member of former President Rafael Correa's political party, sparking controversy. Sofia Espin was ousted from the assembly for talking to a witness on the kidnapping case that allegedly involves former President Rafael Correa. However, the Citizen Revolution Party has accused the president of the assembly and the current administration of Lenín Moreno of political persecution of assembly members who align with the former president. And hundreds of indigenous people arrived to Ecuador's capital, Quito, to urge the National Assembly to protect their water reserves. They have marched for 11 days from the Amazonian city of Napo to deliver a proposal that would protect the region by banning mining. Indigenous people are also calling for bilingual education, the end of the criminalization of their leaders, and an agrarian reform. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, brings us the latest of the Indigenous March.
Hello, yes, indeed. More than 1,000 indigenous people have marched through Ecuador's capital, Quito, with a clear message: stop mining on indigenous territories. That said, it's not possible that the government and the transnational companies want to keep destroying the forest. The march started on the Ecuadorian Amazon and finished in Quito, where they met with the President of the National Assembly, Elizabeth Cabezas. The main leaders of the indigenous group have submitted a bill against the mining. Also, on the other hand, indigenous groups of women have occupied the hydrocarbons ministry, where they said that they are against the oil companies. They can affect the Yasuni, also with close with another groups in defense of the environment. They said that it's not possible that the government are not comply with the agreement between these groups and the government. They are also demanded that the government is not clear in this in their message, so they are started this march with this intention to put clear that they don't want to that the oil companies and the mining companies will go to the Amazon. So this is all the information we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
That was Denise Herrera right here from Quito. On Wednesday, Cuba announced it will end its collaboration with the More Doctors program in Brazil, which provided medical aid to impoverished communities in the South American nation. More details in this report.
The Cuban Health Department has announced their doctors will leave the More Doctors program in Brazil. The decision came just after President-elect Jair Bolsonaro referred to the Cuban specialists in a threatening and dismissive way. Bolsonaro also reaffirmed his willingness to change the terms and conditions of the agreement with the organization.
They say that this was a program that barely benefited the Cuban government. But actually, this is a program that offered medical care to 60 million Brazilians that didn't have access to basic medical care before. So, Cuba and other countries ending their contribution to the program means ending with it.
The program was created in 2013 under former President Dilma Rousseff. It promoted the assistance efforts of Brazilian and foreigner doctors in poor and isolated areas of the country.
We have an extraordinary health public system, but the support of Cuban doctors who went to small towns was very important to our country. It was a huge opportunity because it brought a different kind of medicine that was centered on prevention and the human being, and that was important for Brazil. It's an irony that Bolsonaro's government program is aiming at privatizing our health system. He was the victim of an attack in a small city in Minas Gerais, and he was saved by our health system. He was operated in a hospital that receives public resources to do surgical operations like that. He was saved by the system he wants to privatize.
People around Brazil are grateful for the respect, professionalism, and attention of the Cuban doctors that contributed to their country.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Letters demanding a vote of no confidence are piling up against British Prime Minister Theresa May. Some of her own MPs are calling for her removal over the Brexit deal. The move comes after 4 members of May's government resigned early Thursday. The backlash also comes just after Cabinet had agreed to support the draft version of the agreement.
Morning, Minister.
But the Prime Minister remains defiant in wake of this crisis.
Yes, difficult and sometimes uncomfortable decisions have had to be made. I understand fully that there are some who are unhappy with those compromises. But this deal delivers what people voted for, and it is in the national interest. And we can only secure it if we unite behind the agreement reached in Cabinet yesterday. If we do not move forward with that agreement, nobody can know for sure the consequences that will follow. It would be to take a path of deep and grave uncertainty when the British people just want us to get on with it.
Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, has more on the dramatic day in Westminster.
Today, Thursday, saw a dramatic day of cabinet resignations and threats to Theresa May's premiership, with the news that the Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, had resigned this morning over his opposition to the deal which in theory he helped negotiate with the European Union over the terms of Britain's exit from the bloc. This was closely followed by Esther McVey, the Work and Pension Secretary, by 10 in the morning London time, and speculation was rife that other cabinet ministers would resign. So junior ministers have resigned and their parliamentary aides, and Theresa May's premiership looks increasingly fragile. Now, she was forced to give a press conference at 5 p.m. London time in which she was defiant in defending the course of action, the deal that she would be putting forward to the country, which would be effectively the one that the European summit on the 25th of November would be debating. Now, she has also faced today a public call of no confidence by the influential backbencher Jacob Rees-Mogg, who submitted a letter to the 1922 committee. 48 of these letters are needed to trigger a leadership contest. And in addition, the former foreign minister, Boris Johnson, widely seen as an adversary who has his eye on the job of Conservative Party leader, has said that were this deal to be put to Parliament, he would vote against it. Now, the Labour Party, for their part, have, in a bruising exchange with Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who mocked Theresa May's shambolic what he called sort of shambolic approach to the Brexit negotiations, have said that they will not they would not support this in a parliamentary vote. So Theresa May is facing a wide-ranging level of opposition, both within her party and without, although she's defiant that she will continue with the course of action. Whether she will be able to remains to be seen, but she's severe, as of tonight, much weakened, and we will see whether she's actually able to survive the next few days.
We thank Pablo Navarrete for that report. The African Union's 20th session of the Executive Council has opened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. It has pledged to increase its commitment in pursuing institutional reform. Chairperson of the Executive Council, Musa Faki Mahama, said reform will improve the work of the African Union Commission. The Executive Council session is a preliminary to the African Union Assembly, which runs from the 17th to the 18th of November. The United States Treasury has imposed sanctions on the 17 Saudi nationals accused of killing veteran journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. According to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in addition to these sanctions, his department will continue to seek facts, consult the U.S. Congress, and work with other countries to hold all those involved accountable. International and regional trade is dominating the 21st session of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Here's more on that and other stories from around the world.
The Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has called for a collective effort to maintain multilateralism and free trade at this year's Association of Southeast Asian Nations +3 leaders meeting. The meeting took place in Singapore, which is one of the 10 members of ASEAN, and in attendance were 3 of its dialogue partners, China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. Keqiang praised the ASEAN and +3 alliance in tackling the Asian and international financial crisis and insisted it must continue to curb protectionism. The 3 partners are advancing the trilateral free trade agreement negotiations that will contribute to peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Displaced Yemenis living in refugee camps in the northern part of the country have shared their experiences of the war. As fighting between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthi fighters intensifies, nearly 20,000 people have been displaced recently. According to the United Nations, Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with over 22 million people in need of some form of assistance. 13 million are at risk of dying from starvation.
We were displaced from the district of Sada, but we did not find anything. We did not even find firewood, and there is no food. Our situation is bad. We receive half a bag of flour, which is not enough for displaced families who have 7 or 8 children. How will half a bag of flour and half a can of oil be sufficient for one when we have sick children that we could not find even in a mosquito net?
The Taliban have killed 30 members of the Afghan National Army and local police force in Farah province. Reportedly, the Taliban attacked an outpost late on Wednesday, lasting 4 hours. The district police commander, Abdul Jabbar, was also killed. Security in the area has now been heightened following the attack.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.